and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I'm Millie, and this is a space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. Today's video is all about my 5 most worn hand knit sweaters of 2024, and here they are. So while I was looking through my sweaters, trying to narrow down which ones I wore the most this year, I was also trying to analyze them to see if I could come up with some conclusions to better form my 2025 Make 9, my winter knitting plans, and just like my overall knitting goals for the next year. And with that in mind, I made a list of questions that I hope to answer for each of these sweaters. So let's see. The questions are: number 1, what is the construction of the sweater? Number 2, who is the designer? Did I knit more patterns by them? Number 3, does it have a little or a lot of ease? So I don't have concrete measurements for these, but all of them do have positive ease. It's just by varying degrees. Number 4, what length did I knit it to? Again, I don't have concrete measurements for these. I will just talk about them in like relative proportion to my body. Number 5, how do I primarily wear it? Number 6, what yarn did I use? The color, the weight, the fiber content, the construction, etc. And hopefully after I answer all of these questions for each individual sweater, at the end of the video, I can come back and hopefully at the end of the video, I can come back and draw the conclusions that I wanted to make to better inform my making plans for next year. And I gave myself 4 questions for that too. What colors do I want to knit? What types of yarns do I want to work with? Are there any patterns I plan on knitting again? And number 4, what types of construction do I prefer? Now, the answers to those questions are not going to be like hard and fast rules for my 2025 make plans. They're just something I would like to know in the back of my head. They're just something I would like to know in the back of my mind when I am thinking of making my plans or casting on something next year. If you've watched any of my seasonal planning videos or my Make 9 video from last year, you know that my approach to it is very loosey-goosey. I like having them as a guideline, but by no means do I hold myself, I don't want to say I don't hold myself accountable, but like I go into it knowing that I'm not going to hold myself to strictly following these plans, because knitting is for fun, and if it's fun for me to follow my plans, that's great. If it's fun for me to make the plans and then just do whatever the heck I want afterwards, that's great too. There's really no rules here. So without further ado, let's get into my 5 most worn hand knit sweaters of 2024. And these are not in any particular order. They're just in whatever order. There's just 5 of them. I guess I should start off with my number 1 most worn hand knit sweater of the year, and that is this sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear in red. And I'm saying it in red because I actually have 3 of these sweaters and I wear all of them a lot, but this was definitely my most worn. So the construction of this sweater, this has a drop shoulder construction. However, it has some underarm shaping, and then you do knit a sleeve cap with short rows when you knit the sleeves. So it's somewhere between a drop shoulder construction and a set and sleeve construction. It's like a modified version of those two, I would say. And I really, really like the fit that it gives. A lot of times, for instance, like I've knit sweater number 14, and while I really, really like that one, I sometimes do feel like I'm drowning in it a little bit. That one is a drop shoulder construction as well, and while it does have some short row shaping for the back, it doesn't have any underarm shaping, and the drop is definitely much more dramatic than in this sweater. I just think that the addition of that underarm shaping and the sleeve cap just makes this sweater fit me better. So it does have like a relaxed drop shoulder fit, but there's not as much excess fabric in the underarms compared to some other drop shoulder sweater pattern. So this sweater is a pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I have knit other patterns from her, and I literally, while I was finishing up this sweater, I had already cast on a second one of this, so I absolutely have knit this pattern again. I have knit more patterns from this designer, and I plan to knit more patterns from this designer in 2025. I really like her simple aesthetic. I generally like the fit of the garment, and I do think in recent years she has been better about having a more size inclusive size range. So I've knit this sweater 3 times, and to be honest, I could totally see myself knitting a 4th one in 2025. I just enjoy wearing this so much. It's just like my favorite sweater. It's so comfortable and cozy, and this one has a lot more positive ease. I'm pretty sure my gauge was kind of loose on this one. However, my tan colored one does not have as much positive ease, and I still really like it. And then the black one that I knit also has slightly less positive ease than this one, and it is more cropped. That one I'm able to wear with like high-waisted skirts. Like I have some maxi skirts or midi skirts that I like to wear in the winter, and that one works with that. I think because this one is a little bit longer, and because I did the folded over neckline, that, I don't know, I feel like folded over necklines kind of like tend to stretch out over time, and this one definitely has. I feel like it has a little bit more of a casual vibe, whereas the one that I knit in black, I knit it with Woolfolk Far, I want to say. It's their mohair merino blend. That yarn is so nice. It was gifted to me for a knit along that they were doing for the sweater pattern, and that one does have a little bit more of a polished feel to it just because it is shorter and not as oversized, but I like both of them. And where was I going with this? Oh, so this one I did knit longer. Like this one I can wear over pants, I can wear it with sweatpants, I can wear it with jeans. I haven't really worn it with skirts or dresses just because I think it is a little bit too long proportionally for me. And yeah, I think like I was saying, I honestly think I could knit a 4th one in 2025. I do also have sometimes I confuse the numbers. I think it's sweater number, I want to say number 25 or 27. The pattern photo of it is in a green, and I'm pretty sure the sample is knit with 3 different strands, and it has a slightly looser gauge. I also own that pattern, so maybe I will knit that one before coming back to this one. But yeah, this is like a 10 out of 10 sweater for me. I wear it like at least once a week. And I really like this sweater when I go out to walk outside. It's a great layering piece, which brings me to the yarn combination that I used. So this is knit with a strand of Nutiden unspun wool and a strand of the Zaire silk mohair, and this is like one of my favorite yarn combinations. Not necessarily like the specific yarns, but holding a strand of mohair with a strand of unspun wool is like top tier in my books. It makes a fabric that is very light and airy, but also very warm. But I'm not prone to sweating in this. Like if it's under, let's say like 60 degrees, I can very comfortably wear this without sweating, and I don't feel any prickliness on my skin. I will say though, if it is a little bit warmer, I definitely do start to feel the prickliness of the Nutiden and the mohair. So like, I feel like I don't have the proper vocabulary to describe what this fabric feels like, because when I say soft in regards to yarn, maybe you're thinking of like a very soft merino or like a superwash merino, and without a doubt those are soft. But I feel like this type of fabric is also soft, but soft in a different way. Like you can definitely feel that it is a woolly wool, but it feels so comfortable on the skin. I don't know a better description for it than soft, while also regarding that it is not the softest of wools. I don't know. How would you, if you have knit with a yarn combination like this, how would you describe it? Please let me know, because I am lacking the words. But yeah, I really enjoy this yarn combination, and I haven't knit with any unspun wool yet this fall winter. So I definitely need to get on that. So while we're on the topic of unspun wool and mohair, I guess we can talk about the next sweater, which is knit with the same combination. Oh, and I should say Newton is one of my favorite unspun wools, and I think out of all the like commercially dyed mohairs that I've tried, the Isaera one is my favorite. I do find it to be the softest and the least itchiest, and also I think it sheds less than other mohairs. Like, I know people love the knitting for olive mohair, and I do like that one. I like the color range. I like that it's more mid-priced. I actually think it's the most affordable silk mohair I can find in stores local to me. However, I feel like the knitting for olive mohair just sheds so much, and it's not as soft as Isaera mohair in my opinion, but it is cheaper and it does have a better color range. So let's talk about the next sweater, which is another Nutridin and silk mohair. My next most worn sweater of 2024 is the Busan sweater by Akio Knits. This is a raglan construction sweater. It does have a pretty deep raglan and it does have a lot of positive ease. It is knit top down. You do cast on directly with the ribbing because you have the cable flowing into the ribbing in the sweater. This is a pattern designed by Akio Knits. I think they do such a great job with their cabled sweater patterns. I feel like their cabled patterns have a very like modern feel to them. Sometimes I feel like a lot of cable sweaters have a very classic feel to them. And not that classic can't feel modern, but I don't know. If you know what I'm talking about, I feel like classic is one vibe and modern is another vibe. And sure, they can meet together, but oftentimes they don't. So I would say like a classic looking cabled sweater would be like the Moby sweater by Petite Knit, or some of the Sorry Nordland sweater patterns. I feel like those cables look very classic. But I don't know, I think like the one big cable down the center, the very oversized feel, the 2x2 rib, this feels more like a modern cable sweater. Am I just making this up, or do you also understand my train of thought? So like I said, this one does have a lot of positive ease. I did knit this one a little bit longer, not longer than the pattern, I should say. I'm only 5'1", so I seldom knit things longer than the pattern. When I mean longer, I mean longer on me, because this one does go over my hips by a little bit. So I comfortably can wear this with jeans, high-waisted jeans. I mean, I only really wear high-waisted jeans. I do actually wear this one with some dresses. Like if the dress is more tapered on the bottom, then I do wear this sweater, and I'll kind of just like do a little millennial tuck for the front of the sweater. But yeah, mostly just wear this one with pants. And yeah, this is again another one that just has like such a cozy, comfy feel to it. And again, it is knit with one strand of Nutridin and one strand of silk mohair. I used the Wandering Flocks silk mohair, and this is actually the sweater that made me realize there are ways that I can use those like highly variegated hand-dyed yarns in a way that I think fits better with my personal style. It's a little bit more muted. Like when you look up close at the fabric, you can see like some of the variation in the hand-dyed yarn. Perhaps in this lighting you cannot see it best, but like when I look up close at the sweater, I can definitely see there's like different tonal colors in the fabric. And I know I do have some pictures from the end of last year or the beginning of this year. I think I literally actually cast this off on like December 1st. So I did knit this primarily last year, but I know I took some pictures of the yarn before it was knit up, and then some pictures of the fabric in direct sunlight where you can see more of the variation in the hand-dyed mohair that I use. So yeah, I would like to knit more sweaters with this kind of yarn combination where I do get to experience the fun variegated colors, but the unspun wool just mutes it so much that it's much more wearable and fits in better with my personal style. And again, like this fabric is just so light, warm, airy, dreamy, whatever you want to call it. So I'm fairly certain that this sweater, I don't think it weighs more than 400 grams. Wait, let me get my phone so I can check my Ravelry notes. Because both of these sweaters I'm pretty sure they're written as Aran weight sweaters, but because of my yarn choice, they weigh so much less than they would weigh if I used a spun yarn. So my red sweater number 23 weighs 425 grams versus the one that I knit with Amano Wormy, which is a alpaca wool blend. It's like a standard spun yarn. That one weighs 687 grams, so much heavier. And then, excuse me, this Busan sweater weighs 362. Is that math right? 240 plus 122. Yes, 362 grams, which is so light for what is, how is this categorized? What is an Aran weight sweater? And actually, I do think this one is, yeah, so I knit the size 2, and if I used the recommended yarn in the pattern, I would be using 550 grams plus 175 grams, which is 725 grams of yarn. So this combination of yarns literally made this sweater half the weight. And I don't mind wearing heavier sweaters, but I definitely find myself gravitating more towards these lighter sweaters. And I have so much unspun yarn in stash because I joined either, I think like at the end of 2022 and most of 2023, I was in the Newton Patreon where you get early access to their shop updates. And I had this like mindset, like I'm paying every month for the Patreon. So that just means I need to shop every single update. And that's what I ended up doing. So I did end up canceling the Patreon, not because I didn't think I was getting my value, but I was just purchasing way too much yarn. And we're entering into 2025 and I still have so much Newton in stash. I actually think did I mute them on Instagram? I don't know, because whenever their posts pop up, it's really hard to resist the allure, the call of their yarn. So if you're unfamiliar with Newton, they are a Swedish yarn producer. They use a lot of Swedish old breeds, and they come out with, I want to say like at least 6 or 7 collections throughout the year, either like every month or every other month. And they use different blends of fiber every single collection, and they have different colors every single collection. And basically once the color is sold out, it's done. They don't recreate colors or recreate fiber blends. They do create similar colors. So let's say there's one month where you really like the shade of green, but it's not meant to be, like you can't purchase it for whatever reason. Maybe like 6 months down the line, they'll come out with another green that it's not going to be the same exact color, but it will be similar-ish. And that's really the only way I have been able to exert any sort of self-control over their yarn, because yeah, I tell myself I may really love this yarn now and I may not be able to get this exact yarn, but I do know several months down the line or whenever I am ready to add more unspun wool to my stash, they will come out with a similar colorway. So I would definitely love to knit more unspun wool projects in 2025 because I have so much of it in stash. And I would like to knit some like colorwork or scrappy projects with it, because I do have like at least like 5 or 6 sweater quantities, but I also have like so many single plates because I would be like, oh, I like this color, let me just buy a little bit of it. A little bit of it is still like 100 grams, and they're pretty big plates. That was my sidetracked thoughts on unspun wool, which I guess I will talk about again at the end of the video when I talk about like my overarching conclusions. So those were my 2 unspun wool projects that made it into my top 5. While I guess we're just going from one to one to one. They're all these projects are kind of linked, because my next most worn sweater of 2025 is another design from AQ Knits. My next most worn sweater of 2024. Did I say 2025? Did I just say most worn sweaters of 2025? Doesn't make sense. My next most worn hand knit sweater of 2024 is the Euro sweater. And it's funny how I was just talking about how I like lighter sweaters, because this is a hefty boy. This is a very, very hefty sweater. This has a lot of weight to it. So this is the Euro sweater pattern by AQ Knit, and I think by this point we have established that I'm a fan of their designs. I really like the way they design cables. I mean, Is this not the cable sweater to end all cable sweaters? This one has a very, very interesting construction where you cast on for a sleeve, you knit the body sideways, part of it is knit in the round, part of it is knit flat, you do have some seaming, and then you knit the second sleeve. And I knit this sweater and I wore it to my first Rhinebeck, which is Rhinebeck 2023. But I still got a ton of wear out of it this year. This is definitely a sweater I have to wear in the depths of winter because I'm fairly certain this sweater is like almost 700 grams. So it is very, very heavy, but I love it. I think it's just it's such an understated statement piece because it is cabled all over and you have a bunch of different cabling motifs. But because I knit it in a single ply yarn, the cables are a little bit flatter than, let's say, if I used a 4-ply yarn, and definitely using this dark chocolatey brown color also makes it a little bit more muted. I don't know, like the combination of a very bold design with a more muted yarn, I'm into that combination. It makes something that is a statement piece but still like very easily wearable in my wardrobe. Like, don't get me wrong, I would have loved this sweater as well in a hot pink. Like if I use like a 4-ply yarn hot pink where the cables would be very, very crisp and defined, I would still absolutely love that sweater, but I don't think I would have gotten as much wear as I get out of this version. And this sweater has a ton of positive ease. I do think I knit it a little bit too large, but it's okay because it's so comfy cozy. The length of it is also good. It's like the perfect length for me to wear with both skirts and with like high-waisted jeans. And I think part of that reason is because it does just have so much positive ease, even though it is slightly closer to my hips rather than my waist. I can still wear it with skirts without it feeling like it is overwhelming my frame, just because I do think it has like that like slopey, drapey shape to it. I'll try to insert a picture of me where I am wearing it with a skirt, and it's like a very me outfit, it feels like. What yarn did I knit this with? So I knit this with Noro Haunui, which I think sadly might be discontinued. So this yarn is made of Haunui wool, which I'm pretty sure is like a New Zealand wool, and they don't dye it. It's just the natural color of the sheep, and that's why I feel like maybe this year at the beginning of the year, they did come out with new colorways of it, because obviously like once you run out of one run of the natural color sheet, you can't get the same exact color. Yeah, this was actually some of the first yarn that I ever bought. Like I learned about webs and I went on there and I was just like fixated on this yarn for months before purchasing it. I don't remember what I initially wanted to make with it, but it did end up becoming this Euro sweater like a year and a half after I bought it. The one thing about this single ply yarn is that it is very prone to pilling. Like this definitely needs a good shave. There is pilling all over the sweater, so it does looks a little beat up, but it's okay. And would I knit with this wool again? Yes, I would. I really love the single ply Noro yarns. They may not be for everybody. Like they have a thick, thin texture, and they might have some vegetable matter in them. But I just love the vibe of it. It's my favorite. Nora is definitely one of my favorite yarn brands. I think they make really cool yarns. Like the sweater that I'm wearing is also knit in Noro. I should have probably steam blocked it before wearing it because it's been packaged up, but whatever. But this also has like a thick, thin texture to it. And while this one is obviously dyed and it has crazy colors, this one is not, but I love both of them. And they're both like single ply Aran weight yarns that come in really big cakes. So let's see, how can I relate the next sweater to this one? I guess my last two most worn sweaters of 2024 are also in a neutral color palette. First we have cardigan number 9. Sometimes I really get confused by the whole number naming system that My Favorite Things Knitwear uses, even though I feel like I talk about this cardigan all the freaking time. This is cardigan number 9, I think. It is a saddle shoulder knit flat top down cardigan. you start by knitting off the like rectangles for the saddle shoulders, which I really love that sort of construction because you can just use that as your gauge swatch. It's perfect. You don't have to knit a dedicated gauge swatch. And I think we've already established I really like My Favorite Things Knit More Patterns, and I would totally knit more patterns by her again, and I plan to. This sweater has not that much positive ease because I'm fairly certain I knit it off gauge. The whole time I was knitting this sweater, I was afraid that it was going to be too tight, but I ended up blocking out perfectly. I also really like the length that I knit this sweater to. I knit it to just above my hips, I think. Like when I'm wearing high-waisted jeans, it hits like right near the top of the jeans. Like maybe it goes over like an inch. Yeah, I really like the length and the overall shape of the sweater. I totally plan on knitting it again next year. If you watched my fall knitting plans video, you'll know that I am absolutely having a love affair with crew neck button down cardigans. I had planned to knit more in the fall. Alas, it didn't happen, but it's totally happening in 2025 and totally happening over this winter. I am declaring it to be. The yarn that I used for this was also another winner for me. This was my first time knitting with Derurum Natura's yarn. This is their Gilead, which I think is a worsted weight yarn. It is a non-superwash merino. So over the years, I feel like not even superwash. I feel like merino necessarily isn't my favorite type of wool. It is super duper soft, but I feel like it also sometimes has like a slipperiness to it or like a shininess to it, and a lot of times that is because of like the superwash process, but I feel like sometimes even like non-superwash merinos kind of feel slippery and slick to me because they're just so soft. So this one I'm fairly certain also is a merino, but it's not like that extra fine merino, and I see that as a plus because it's still so soft, but it still has like a woolly feel to it. I really enjoy this yarn, and I honestly wasn't sure about the color when I first bought it because I bought this when I was in Paris in the spring, and I was basically traveling for a little bit over a month, and I did not anticipate how cold it would be in June in Europe. And sorry, I have like fuzz all over my lip. I have like fuzz in my lip balm. I didn't anticipate how cold it would be in June, so I decided instead of buying a cardigan, I can just knit a cardigan. So I bought a sweater quantity of this Derurum Natura Gilead at Lil Weasel, and I tried to pick a color that would work with most of the dresses that I had picked, and this was the closest bet. So this isn't a color like, I don't think I have any other yarn in my stash this color because I don't really go for grays. I wasn't sure how it would look against my skin tone, but I actually really like it. I find it very wearable. I mean, duh, it's a gray. I'm not sure if I'll be running out to buy more gray, and I'm not sure if this is like my sort of flattering color. Like, does it give me corpse vibes? I don't know. I don't care. I like it. So yes, fan of the color, fan of the yarn. I would totally buy more of this yarn. I don't have any international trips planned for next year, but I'm fairly certain I will end up traveling at some point next year. And if I travel to a country that sells this yarn, if I travel somewhere in Europe and I visit a yarn store that sells this yarn, I would totally buy more of it. They actually do sell it in the US now. I mean, they sold it in the US for a while, I should say. They sell it locally to me now. I'm fairly certain that Brooklyn General Store has started carrying this base, and I know in New Jersey that the Blue Pearl has also started carrying Derurum Natura. I don't know if they have this exact base. Maybe they will bring it in, but I am a big fan of this. While traveling, I also bought a ball of their silk mohair blend, which I'm so excited to try, and I hope that one of the two stores that I mentioned end up carrying their silk mohair too, because they have really nice colors, and just like feeling it in the ball, it felt pretty soft. I don't really see a lot of people talking about it. I'm unsure if it's one of the mohairs that also has, so I feel like most silk mohairs are just silk and mohair, but then some of them have additional fibers blended in, like the tin silk mohair from Santa's Garden has wool blended in as well, and then the Uma from Amano Yarns has Surrey blended in as well. I don't remember if the Jura Natura one does have a third fiber or not. Either way, Jura Natura is definitely a yarn brand I would like to knit more of in 2025. We are down to the last sweater now. The last of my most worn sweaters of 2025 is the Highline Henley by Tori Yu, or Tori Knits NYC on Instagram, and this is a top-down drop shoulder sweater pattern, and then it has this Henley detail in the neckline. There are buttonholes, but I don't think I did the best job doing the buttonholes, so I just leave it open. I didn't even bother sewing in buttons. I like it the way it is. So this is another drop shoulder construction sweater, and I think that the way that the striping pattern is done in this sweater is so smart and well written, because a lot of times, like, the shoulder details of a striped sweater, maybe it doesn't look the cleanest, but I think Tori did such a good job of designing it where the shoulder details, like the stripes, just look so clean and well done. That was one of my favorite aspects of this sweater pattern, and in general I really like Tori's patterns. I am a big fan of the Manhattan hat. This year I also test knit the Metropolitan pullover by her, and I really like the fit of it, and I like the writing style. I find it very easy to follow. So I find it a style that's easy to follow, so a beginner could easily knit her patterns, but like not so hand-holdy that somebody who is a little bit more experienced of a knitter finds like there's just too much unnecessary information. It's just like the happy medium. This sweater does have quite a bit of ease at my bust, like width-wise, but then I did knit it quite cropped. I'm fairly certain I knit this one to the pattern length, so it might be written as a cropped sweater. I don't remember. This is another one of those sweaters where I am able to wear it with both jeans and with high-waisted dresses or skirts. I actually don't think I've worn it over any dresses, so that's a lie. I have worn it with high-waisted skirts. I think it's just, I don't think the like Henley vibes and the color really work with the dresses in my wardrobe, but it works really well with skirts and pants. I don't know. I guess like the Henley vibes do kind of like juxtapose like the girliness of some of my dresses, but it didn't juxtapose in a way I liked. But I do really like wearing it with like denim skirts and pants and like black yoga pants or black knit pants. And then the yarn that I knit this with, I really like the yarn combination as well on this sweater, and it was my first time using these two brands. So the cream yarn is Blue Sky Fibers Woolstock, and then the black yarn is Cascade 220. This was my first time knitting with both of those brands, and I knit this sweater last year, but I'm kind of sad that I didn't buy more of these brands this year. Something to keep in mind for 2025. So I always thought of Cascade 220 as like kind of a blah yarn. I don't know where I got that idea in my mind, but after knitting with it, I'm like, I get the hype. I really get it. It is a nice woolly wool. It's quite affordable. They have a great range of colors, and as I'm looking at all these sweaters, I realize I really need to like shave all of these. This is just like covered in fuzz. I don't know how well you can see that on camera. And considering it is a black and white sweater, I was totally scared that when I was blocking it, the black would bleed, but the black did not bleed at all. I should say though, I do always wash my hand knit garments in cool water. If you use hot water, I can't say if it would bleed or not. So yeah, the Blue Sky Fibers Woolstock and the Cascade 220, I want to say they're both Peruvian Highland wool, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. You might need to double check that if you want to know. But I think they're great like workhorse yarns. They feel sturdy, but not rough. And they come in, the Woolstock I don't think comes in as many colors, but Cascade 220 totally comes in a great range of colors. And if you really want to try Peruvian Highland wool by Filcolana, but you live in the US, I feel like Cascade 220 is very, very similar to it and much more easily accessible. I am fairly certain I bought it at a local to me yarn store. I feel like a lot of yarn stores do carry Cascade and Cascade 220, but if you want to see like the full color range, you can check Wool and Company, which I've talked about a few times now. They are my like go-to place to order yarn online in the US because they have free shipping with no minimum. And not only do they carry the entire range of Cascade 220, they also carry the entire range of like Cascade 220 Sport, Cascade 220 Fingering. I think is there like a bulky version as well? I don't know, but they have it all. Totally foresee myself buying more Cascade 220 in my future. Oh, and then the wool stock doesn't come in the largest color range, but I think the appeal of the wool stock is that it comes, you can buy it in 150-gram hanks, which is great because it means you do not have to weave in as many ends or split slice as many ends. I'm fairly certain I had 2 150-gram hanks of the cream and I ended up using 1.5, I want to say, but it just meant less ends for me to split splice, and both of them are non-superwash wools, so yeah, I was able to split splice them in this project. This has nothing to do with anything, but I actually do like the way that, is this, I can't even remember which side I carried the yarn. Oh yeah, I actually do like the way that my jogless stripes worked up in the sweater. I feel like it looks pretty clean. I have to check my project notes to see how I did that. Wait, in the video, does it look bad? Am I gaslighting myself? I don't know. I think it looks pretty clean. It has been folded on that line because it has been packaged away. Oh, and I did make a mistake in the body of the sweater where I accidentally knit an extra row in that one black stripe, but I didn't realize it until I think I was in the ribbing, and by that point I was like, I cannot rip back. I think this was also a test knit and I was like nearing the deadline, so I just let it be and I called it a design feature. It honestly doesn't really bother me. So yeah, that is the last of my most worn sweaters, and I have to give a shout out to the sweater. It didn't make the top 5 cut. This is the Step by Step sweater by Florence Mills. I get confused because there's a Florence Miller, I think, and a Florence Mills. But this is by the YouTuber Handmade by Florence. So this is a free top-down raglan sweater pattern. It also has a free video tutorial, which is great if you want to knit your first sweater pattern and you don't know where to start. Totally recommend checking out this pattern. And yeah, it's just very straightforward and easy to knit. I knit the version with the short rows, but if it's your first sweater and you don't feel comfortable doing that, she also has instructions on how to knit this without the short rows. And the only reason this one did not make my 5 most worn sweaters of 2024 is because I knit this last winter. So while I was packing my sweaters up for like the warmer month, it was at the bottom of the bag and I just didn't end up opening it or taking it out for this winter until like a week ago. So if I had unpacked this in like the end of August or beginning of September, I definitely think it would have made the list. I would have gotten more wear out of it, but purely because I had it packed away, it didn't make the cut. But I do really, really like the sweater. It is a raglan, but it has like a nice yoke depth. There's still like some ease, but it's not so much that I feel like it's overwhelming. And I really, really love the yarn that I used for this. So the stripy like body and the neckline, I used Noro Ito, which is a self-striping yarn. It is a single ply 100% non-superwash wool yarn, and I used 2 balls of it because each ball is 200 grams, but I was running out, so I bought a contrast color in Noro Malvinas, which has like the yarn itself is like the same construction as the Ito, but instead of being self-striping, it is just like a tonally dyed color. And I did the sleeve ribbing with that, and I also did the body ribbing with that, but I'm not going to stand up because I'm wearing sweatpants. So just have to trust me. Or I have pictures on my Ravelry where you can see the whole sweater, or my Instagram, whatever you want to see it on. Okay, so I have finally finished talking about all 5 of the sweaters. Let's go back to the questions that I mentioned in the beginning so that I can share about how these sweaters I think are going to shape my knitting plans for the upcoming season as well as the upcoming year. So in terms of color, I think there was a range. I did knit with a lot of neutrals, but I also had a bright red sweater as one of my most worn sweaters, and then like a tonally hand-dyed pink sweater. I don't think the lighting that I showed it in, you really got the full effect of that pink sweater. So hopefully I have some like other footage or pictures from earlier where you can see it better. I do think I could knit with some more neutrals because I do have quite a bit of cream yarn and dark brown yarn in stash, and I really do like those colors as neutrals. And as evidenced by my Euro sweater, sometimes I think like I'm not going to enjoy knitting with neutrals because it can seem kind of boring, but I can pair it with a more interesting or intricate or detailed pattern and get something that is still a neutral but not boring. And then in terms of colors, I love color. I'm going to continue to love color, and yeah, I totally see more colorful knits in my 2025. I will say, I do think I like commercially dyed yarns. I don't know if it's like sacrilegious to say. I do think I enjoy knitting more, but I think in general, I kind of like knitting more with commercially dyed yarns than hand dyed yarns. Don't get me wrong, hand dyed yarns are so beautiful, but they do come with their own setbacks. Like when I look at all the sweaters that I knit, only one of them used hand dyed yarn, and it was a hand dyed silk mohair. Versus, at least like with the silk mohair, because it's not overtaking the sweater, you can find a similarly colored commercially dyed yarn if you run out, and you can blend it in and make it work. But if you're using a hand dyed wool and you run out, I feel like it's like really difficult to keep going. You either have to wait for the dyer to bring back that collection or find somebody who's selling it in a D-stash or something like that, and yeah, you're kind of like stuck if you run out of yarn. That's not to say like I run out of yarn on every project, but I am thinking specifically of my Ingrid sweater, which I cast on with some hand dyed yarn at the beginning of the year, and I think I have to frog that project because even though I bought an amount that according to the pattern I should be able to finish the sweater, I don't think I will. And I just remember I specifically bought this colorway because I loved the tonality and like very, very slight variegation in the dyeing style. But I didn't think that I didn't think of it when I was casting on that I would be knitting all this like textured stuff while also having to helically knit in the different skeins of the hand-dyed yarn. And it just caused a lot of unnecessary work that I don't think I really want to deal with. That said, I do have quite a bit of hand-dyed yarn in stash, and I think I've learned the lesson that I just need to knit my hand-dyed yarn in stockinette projects. Where am I even going with this? How did I even come to this tangent? Wasn't that the question I was answering? What colors do I want to knit with? Okay, so colors that I want to knit with. I do think I want to knit with more neutrals in 2025 and find ways to make it exciting for me, either with the pattern or picking a special yarn. And I think I've confirmed for myself that I do find that brighter colors or quote unquote fun colors can also be wearable to me. So I'm not gonna limit myself by color. Those are my conclusions on color. I do keep saying that I want to knit more dark chocolatey brown sweaters, and I keep not doing it. So I really need to get on that. And I do have a lot of chocolate brown yarn in stash. I think because my Ava cardigan is in that color and I just can't get myself to finish it. So I have to finish that so I can cast more on. I guess I already kind of answered this question about what kind of yarns do I want to work with in 2025 based on that. Oh, I just answered this question. So yeah, I do think I am more leaning towards the commercially dyed yarns. They just feel like require a little bit less work, and I don't really love the look of heavily variegated and speckled yarns in garments. It's not something that necessarily calls to me. And while I do love the tonal hand-dyed yarns, if I am knitting it in a textured or a cabled project, just a little bit more difficult to work with. If it's a stockinette project, absolutely fine, but I'm going to try to limit like any sweater quantity of hand-dyed yarn. I'm going to remember to stick, going to any hand-dyed yarn sweater quantities that I have, I'm going to remember to only knit stockinette projects with them. Also, I really love the unspun wool and silk mohair combination. I found myself reaching for those sweaters so often for their warmth and lightness, and I definitely want to knit more sweaters with that kind of yarn combination in 2025. Are there any patterns I plan on knitting again? 100% I will be knitting another cardigan number 9. I'm actually thinking of casting one on in the new year with the Manchalope in the really dark chocolatey brown color, and then I have this drops mohair that I absolutely loathe in the dark brown color. I had been thinking of using it for the Nordic mix sweater, but I think it'd be a really good match for the Manchalope, and because I'm wearing this cardigan as an outer layer, I'm not as concerned about it being next to my skin versus the grid sweater, which I more likely would have it next to skin. And then I could just buy new mohair for the grid sweater because I've used up the dark brown mohair I already have. And then I could also see myself knitting another Highline Henley because like I said, I really love just like the attention to detail that Tori put in on the stripes, specifically around the shoulder and also around like the front yoke. I think it's a really well done pattern. There are a lot of striped patterns that I really want to knit from Petite Knit, so we'll see what happens. How many striped garments will I knit in 2025? Who knows, but I could see myself knitting another Highline Henley. The Euro sweater and the Busan sweater, while I love them, the Euro sweater is just too much work for me to knit again, but the designer does have other cabled sweaters which I totally do want to knit. So the designer at AGM Knits, I do want to knit more designs from, but those two sweaters specifically, I don't know if I need 2 of them in my closet since they are more unique designs versus like a plain stockinette sweater. And then sweater number 23, I already said I might just go ahead and knit a 4th one because I love that sweater so much. And then I guess, what types of construction do I like? All of these sweaters are either drop shoulders sweaters or raglan sweaters. Really not surprised to find out that those are my preferred sweater constructions, and I see myself knitting more of those types of sweaters into 2025. This video I think ended up being a little bit longer than planned, but that's okay. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I wanted it to be a little bit more useful or informative than me just showing you a picture of each sweater, and hopefully it was. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to give it a like and follow along for more videos. I am hoping to film one more podcast before the end of the year. I also want to make a video reflecting on my Make 9 of 2024. However, I don't know if I will get to that this month or if that's going to just be a January 2025 video. We shall see. I would also love to know what were your most worn garments of 2024. It could be sewn, it could be knitted, it could be crocheted, whatever. And as always, I would love to know what was on your needles while watching this video because I'm nosy and I love to know what other people are working on. So I guess that is truly the end. Thank you again for watching. Happy knitting, happy holidays, and hope to see you again next time. Bye!